the global demand for this resource, which is significant today and going to be much more significant in the months and years ahead. And to have a third of relative to the global reserves, to have a third of that resource present right here in Saskatchewan, that's a significant discussion. It's not just the products that we are producing that are significant, but it's how we are producing those products that are significant. And I think it's a real opportunity for, as I say, the community and surrounding area of Tisdale, but also our province, our nation, and for the world to be able to access a product like this from a secure and reliable, ethical and sustainable trading partner. And there aren't very many countries that meet all of those criteria.
It is one of the most widely used metals on Earth.
Aluminum is one of those metals you barely notice until you realize it's holding up almost everything modern life depends on. The cars we drive, the planes overhead, the power lines stretching across provinces, the phones in our pockets, the batteries that store energy, the solar frames and wind systems feeding the grid, even the packaging that keeps food fresh. Aluminum is everywhere because it's light, strong, and endlessly useful. Now picture this. What if a single region in Canada suddenly turned out to hold a deposit so large it could change the math for the entire North American supply chain? That's the story unfolding around a major discovery in Saskatchewan, near the community of Tisdale. On January 29th, 2026, Canadian Energy Metals Corporation announced results from a preliminary economic assessment, a first serious look at the economics, tied to what it describes as one of the world's largest alumina deposits. Alumina matters because it's the key feedstock used to produce aluminum metal, and in a world racing to electrify transportation, upgrade power grids, and build clean energy infrastructure, demand isn't just high. It's climbing, and it's climbing fast. According to the company's announcement, the Thor project contains 6.8 billion tons of alumina within 49.5 billion tons of ore, located in east-central Saskatchewan near Tisdale. In plain language, it's enormous. The company frames it as roughly one-third of the known global supply of alumina, concentrated across an area stretching roughly 600 kilometers. If those numbers continue to hold up as more drilling and verification happens, it puts Saskatchewan in a conversation that normally belongs to a short list of mining-heavy regions across the globe. Christopher Hopkins, the company's president and CEO, didn't try to hide the ambition of what this could mean. He described the find as a potential game changer for North America's aluminum supply chain, especially at a time when secure supply has become almost as important as cheap supply. And that's where this story gets bigger than rocks in the ground. For years, the global aluminum ecosystem has leaned heavily on foreign sources, particularly China, for a large share of supply and processing. But the era of assuming that supply chains will always stay open, friendly, and predictable is basically over. Industries like aerospace, defense, energy storage, and EV manufacturing now talk about materials the way countries used to talk about oil, not just as commodities, but as strategic necessities. Hopkins made a point that hits home even if you don't follow mining. Almost anything that moves, transmits power, or stores energy uses aluminum somewhere in the chain. And when your economy depends on something that deeply, you start asking uncomfortable questions about where it comes from, how stable the supplier is, and what happens if trade tensions spike or shipping routes get squeezed. Canada produces aluminum, but on the global scale, it's not a dominant supplier. The company's messaging emphasizes that this find is Canada's first major domestic alumina resource, which is a key distinction. Producing aluminum is one thing, having your own major alumina. Feedstock is another. If you can secure that input at home, you reduce risk across the whole value chain. Here's another twist that makes the Thor deposit stand out. The ore body isn't bauxite, which is the typical source of alumina globally. Instead, this deposit sits in a polymetallic black shale. That matters because it changes how the material is mined and processed, what byproducts might be recovered, and potentially how the environmental footprint compares to traditional pathways. The preliminary economic assessment suggests the resource ranges from around 20 to 50 meters below surface in areas already drilled, with the deposit dipping deeper to the west and south. The original discovery hole was drilled back in May 2022, and the work since then has built toward the bigger claim now being made. The scale isn't just in tons. Hopkins highlighted how concentrated the discovery is inside the project footprint. He described it as roughly a 16-mile by 16-mile area, basically the kind of footprint that could fit inside the metropolitan area of a major Canadian city. That concentration matters because it can simplify logistics compared to deposits scattered across a wider region. And it's not only alumina. The company says the broader mineral package totals around 50 billion tons of critical minerals, including nearly 7 billion tons of alumina, plus scandium and vanadium, which are used in alloy production. Those names might sound niche, but they're the kind of small ingredient, big impact materials that can make metals stronger, lighter, and better suited to high performance uses. Now, this is where the announcement really leans into the economic potential narrative. The assessment outlined what the company described as substantial upside: a modeled after-tax internal rate of return of 72%, and an after-tax net present value of about 72.3 billion US dollars discounted at 10%. It also references initial capital expenditures of 6.3 billion US dollars and operating costs stated as roughly 1.6 to 6 billion dollars per year, a wide range that shows how early stage modeling still is. The price assumptions used were $5,000 per ton for chemical grade alumina and $25,000 per ton for high purity alumina. The conceptual production model described is a surface mining and processing operation with average throughput of 16.5 million tons per year of ore feed, supporting alumina production of 1.8 million tons per year over a 25-year mine life. Hopkins also underlined the sheer longevity implied by the scale, saying there could be enough resource to mine for more than 2,000 years at a rate of 50,000 tons per day. That's not a promise of what will happen, but it's a way of communicating how big the resource could be if verified and developed. And of course, you can't tell a story like this without the province leaning in. Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe described the Thor discovery as the kind of alignment governments love: strong policy interest paired with a substantial geological advantage. He talked about the province being excited by the prospect of a new alumina industry setting up in Saskatchewan, and pointed to what it could mean in jobs, investment, and long-term growth. He even suggested that the project could rival the importance of potash or other major minerals in the province, and potentially make aluminum-related exports a key part of Saskatchewan's economic identity. Locally, Tisdale Mayor Mike Hill framed it in practical terms. Agriculture remains the foundation, but the region is ready for new opportunities, and a development like this could bring a long runway of economic activity. The way he described it, this isn't about replacing what the town is, but adding something big alongside it. If you're into big stories like this, where geology, geopolitics, and industry collide in a way that could reshape the next decade, make sure you subscribe. We're going to keep tracking how projects like this develop, what the numbers really mean once more data comes in, and how the critical minerals race is changing the world's power map. Now, beyond the hype and the headlines, One of the strongest arguments being made here is location and infrastructure. The Thor project sits near the center of North America, in a province often regarded as a top-tier mining jurisdiction. The company points to developed infrastructure already in place: power, roads, services, plus CN and CPKC rail lines crossing the property, along with natural gas and electrical transmission lines. There are also 2 hydroelectric dams nearby, totaling 544 megawatts, located near the town of Nipawin. That matters because mining isn't just about what's underground. It's about what it costs to build everything above ground. Access to rail, power, and existing corridors can dramatically shift the economics of whether a project is even buildable at scale. Hopkins emphasized rail capacity as a major advantage, suggesting it could move large quantities to markets across North America and beyond, connecting to both coasts. Then there's the processing angle. Canadian Energy Metals says it has successfully produced 3N chemical-grade alumina and 4N high-purity alumina, recovering alumina up to 99.991% purity. Additional metallurgical and process testing is underway, particularly focused on smelter-grade alumina and recovery of scandium and vanadium. This is where the company tries to separate itself from the typical "we found something big" announcement. It's not just saying the material exists, but that it can be turned into products with real market demand, including higher value grades. Another major theme they pushed hard is environmental positioning. Hopkins and Premier Moe both framed the discovery as an opportunity for ethical, reliable, sustainable supply. The company says processes developed with engineering firm Hatch show economic and environmental advantages compared to producing alumina from bauxite. And Hopkins went as far as calling it potentially the greenest aluminum on Earth. That kind of claim is obviously something that would need to be tested in the real world, with real life cycle analysis and regulatory review. But the logic they're leaning on is straightforward. Canada has access to hydroelectric power, and hydropower can reduce emissions dramatically compared to aluminum production pathways tied to coal-heavy grids. If Saskatchewan can produce alumina and feed aluminum smelting with low-carbon electricity, it has a chance to market the output as cleaner than a lot of existing global supply. And that brings us to why governments and industries care so much right now. The transition away from hydrocarbons is not just about energy, it's about materials. If you want EVs, you need lightweight, efficient components. If you want renewable energy infrastructure, you need massive amounts of metal. If you want to upgrade grids to handle new loads and storage, you need more transmission capacity and more hardware. Aluminum's lightweight strength makes it one of the most sought-after major minerals in this transition era.